Chapter 1. The Unlikely Advisor. In the grand kingdom of Veridale, laughter echoed through the castle halls, emanating from the court jester, known affectionately as Harley. His cap jingled with every step, and his face was often a mask of mirth. But behind his playful eyes lay a keen mind, one that had observed the court and its machinations for years. King Alden, a ruler both fair and feared, often found solace in Harley's jests, especially in times of turmoil. The kingdom was at a crossroads. The question of succession loomed large, the economy teetered on the brink, and calls for social reform grew louder. In such a time, wisdom was needed, but it often came from the most unexpected of places. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden hue over the castle, King Alden summoned Harley. The jester, in his colorful attire, approached the throne with a bow. "Your Majesty, how may I entertain you this fine evening?" Harley asked, his tone light but his eyes searching. The king, a man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a furrowed brow, sighed heavily. "Tonight, Harley, I seek more than entertainment. I seek counsel." Harley raised an eyebrow. "Counsel from a fool? Surely your advisers are more suited to such a task." "Perhaps," the king replied, "but sometimes wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources." Harley's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "Very well, your Majesty. What troubles you?" King Alden leaned back in his throne, staring at the ornate ceiling. "The matter of succession weighs heavily on my mind. My only son, Prince Drystan, was lost to me many years ago. I must choose a successor, but none seem worthy." Harley nodded thoughtfully. "A difficult decision indeed. But perhaps, your Majesty, the answer lies not in bloodlines, but in the heart and mind of the chosen one." The king looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "May I tell you a story, sire?" Harley asked. "It may illuminate my point." The king gestured for him to proceed. Chapter 2. A Story Within a Story. "Once, in a kingdom much like our own," Harley began, "there was a wise and beloved king, but as his years advanced, he faced the same dilemma. Who would succeed him? The king had 2 sons. The elder, strong and brave, was the obvious choice. The younger, though clever, was considered too meek. However, the king decided to test their wisdom. He sent each son into the world with a simple task: to bring back the most valuable thing they could find. The elder son returned with treasures, jewels, and gold, claiming these would strengthen the kingdom. The younger son, however, returned with a single book. The court laughed, but the king was intrigued. In the book were stories of great wisdom and humility. It taught that the strength of a kingdom lies not in its wealth, but in the well-being and unity of its people. The king, recognizing the depth of his younger son's understanding, chose him as his successor. King Alden listened intently, nodding slowly. "A thought-provoking tale, Harley. But how does this help me now?" Harley smiled. "Sometimes, your Majesty, the worth of a successor lies not in their obvious qualities, but in their capacity for wisdom and humility. Perhaps it's time to look beyond the obvious candidates." The king pondered this as Harley excused himself, leaving the throne room in deep thought. Chapter 3. The Jester's Secret Unknown to the Court. Harley carried a secret that weighed heavily on his heart. He was not just a jester. He was Prince Drystan, the king's long-lost son. As a child, he had been abducted by a rival kingdom, but had escaped, finding refuge in the most unlikely of places, a troupe of traveling performers. Adopting the guise of a jester, he had returned to Veridale, hiding in plain sight, biding his time. Over the years, Harley had grown close to the king, offering his insights subtly through his jests and stories. His unique perspective had often steered the king away from folly, though Alden remained unaware of his true identity. One person, however, had begun to suspect. Lady Elara, the court's singer, had a keen eye and a discerning mind. She had noticed the jester's unusually astute observations and the way he seemed to know more about the court's inner workings than he let on. One evening, after a particularly poignant performance, Elara approached Harley as he sat by the fountain in the castle's garden, the moon casting a silvery glow over the water. "You have a way with words, Harley," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "But there's more to you than meets the eye, isn't there?" Harley looked up, startled, then smiled. "What makes you say that, my lady?" Elara sat beside him, her gaze unwavering. "Your eyes, they betray a depth that no mere jester possesses. Who are you truly?" For a moment, Harley considered denying it, but something in Elara's eyes made him trust her. "You're very perceptive, Lady Elara. My true name is Drystan. I am the king's son." Elara's eyes widened, but she remained composed. "Why hide your identity?" Harley sighed. "To observe and learn, to understand the court and the kingdom in a way I never could as a prince, and to find the right moment to reveal myself." Elara nodded. "And that moment is approaching, isn't it?" Harley looked towards the castle, where the king's silhouette could be seen through a window. "Yes, the kingdom needs guidance, and it's time for the truth to come to light." Chapter 4. The King's Dilemma. The next day, King Alden was restless. The story Harley had told him lingered in his mind. He summoned his council, a group of men and women who had served him faithfully for years. They debated potential successors, each presenting their preferred candidate, but none seemed to have the qualities the king sought. After the council adjourned, the king found himself alone in the throne room, staring at a portrait of his lost son. The door creaked open, and Harley entered, his usual playful demeanor replaced with a solemn expression. "Your Majesty," he began, "may I speak freely?" King Alden nodded. "Of course, Harley. What's on your mind?" Harley took a deep breath. "The question of succession is a heavy burden, but perhaps the answer lies closer than you think." The king frowned. "Closer? What do you mean?" "Your Majesty," Harley continued, his voice steady, "what if Prince Drystan were still alive? What if he had been here all along, observing, learning, and waiting for the right moment to return?" King Alden's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" Harley removed his cap, letting his hair fall free. He stood tall, his eyes meeting the king's with an intensity that spoke of years of hidden truth. "I am Drystan, your son." The king staggered back, his mind reeling. "Drystan? But how?" "I was abducted." "Yes, Harley," Drystan said. "But I escaped and found my way back, hiding in plain sight as your jester. I needed to understand the kingdom and its people before revealing myself." Tears filled King Alden's eyes as he embraced his son. "My boy, you've returned at last." Chapter 5. The Advisor's Advice. With his true identity revealed, Drystan took on a new role in the court. While still maintaining his jester persona in public to avoid unnecessary upheaval, he became his father's closest advisor in private. His unique insights, gleaned from years of observation, proved invaluable. The first major challenge was economic policy. The kingdom's coffers were dwindling, and the people were suffering. The king's advisors suggested various solutions, but none seemed sustainable. Drystan, however, proposed a different approach. "Father," he began, "our wealth lies not just in gold, but in our people. We must invest in them, improve education, support small businesses, and encourage innovation. It will be slow, but it will create a stable and prosperous future." King Alden considered this. "But how can we afford such investments?" "By reducing waste and corruption," Drystan replied. "There's much we can save if we govern wisely." The king agreed, and together they implemented these reforms. Over time, the kingdom's economy began to recover, and the people's trust in their leaders grew. Chapter 6. Social Reform and Love. As the kingdom stabilized, calls for social reform grew louder. The people wanted a more just and equitable society, and Drystan knew this was crucial for lasting peace. He proposed a series of reforms aimed at reducing the gap between the nobility and the common folk. These included fairer taxation, improved workers' rights, and greater representation for the people in the council. The nobility resisted at first, fearing loss of power and wealth, but Drystan, using his wit and charm, managed to win them over, often by appealing to their sense of honor and duty to the kingdom. Meanwhile, his relationship with Elara deepened. They spent many evenings together, sharing stories and dreams. Elara, with her compassionate heart and keen intellect, became Drystan's confidant and inspiration. Her songs filled the castle with hope and love, weaving a sense of unity among the people. One night, as they walked through the gardens, Drystan paused by a blooming rosebush. "Elara, you've been my anchor, my muse. Your wisdom and kindness have guided me more than you know." Elara blushed. "And you, Drystan, have shown me the true meaning of courage and leadership. You will be a great king." Drystan took her hand, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I cannot do it alone. Will you stand by my side, not just as a friend, but as my queen?" Elara's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with love. "Yes, Drystan, I will." Chapter 7. The Path to Peace. With Elara's support, Drystan's influence in the court grew. The reforms they championed began to take root, creating a more equitable and just society. The kingdom of Veridale started to flourish, its people united in their efforts to build a brighter future. However, not everyone was pleased with the changes. A faction of disgruntled nobles plotted in the shadows, seeking to undermine Drystan's efforts and restore their lost privileges. One evening, during a grand feast, these nobles made their move. They orchestrated a coup, attempting to seize control of the castle and overthrow King Alden and Drystan. Chaos erupted as guards clashed with the rebels. Drystan, with Elara by his side, led a counterattack. His years of observation and his deep understanding of the castle's layout proved invaluable. Using his wit and strategic mind, he outmaneuvered the rebels, turning the tide in favor of the loyalists. In the midst of the battle, Drystan confronted the leader of the rebellion, a bitter noble named Lord Harrick. "Why do you resist progress, Harrick? Our kingdom thrives when all its people are uplifted." Harrick sneered. "You threaten our way of life, Drystan. We will not be ruled by a jester." Drystan stood tall, his voice unwavering. "I am more than a jester. I am the future of this kingdom, and that future is one of unity and justice." With a final push, the loyalists overcame the rebels. Lord Harrick and his conspirators were captured and brought before the king. King Alden, with Drystan and Elara by his side, addressed the court. "Let this be a lesson to all," the king declared. "Change is not to be feared, but embraced. Those who seek to divide us will fail. Together, we will build a kingdom where everyone has a voice." The court erupted in applause, the people's faith in their leaders restored. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. In the months that followed, Veridale flourished. The economy strengthened, social reforms took hold, and the people thrived. Drystan's wisdom and Elara's compassion guided the kingdom towards a brighter future. King Alden, seeing his son's capabilities and the love of the people for him, decided it was time to pass the crown. In a grand ceremony, he abdicated the throne in favor of Drystan, who was crowned as the new king of Veridale, with Elara as his queen. As they stood before their people, the new king and queen radiated hope and unity. Drystan addressed the crowd, his voice filled with emotion. My journey from jester to king has taught me that wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. It has taught me the value of humility, wit, and seeing the world from different perspectives. Together, we will continue to build a kingdom where everyone is valued and heard. Elara took his hand, her eyes shining with pride. And through love and compassion, we will create a legacy that will endure for generations. The people cheered, their hearts filled with hope. Veridale was more than a kingdom. It was a family united by a shared vision of a better future. Epilogue: The Wisdom of Fools. Years passed, and under King Drystan and Queen Elara's reign, Veridale became a beacon of prosperity and justice. The lessons learned from Feste, the jester with the heart of a prince, echoed through the generations. Drystan often walked through the castle, his jester's cap hanging in his private chambers as a reminder of his journey. He and Elara had children of their own, teaching them the values of humility, wisdom, and seeing the world through others' eyes. One day, as Drystan watched his children play in the gardens, he smiled, remembering his days as Feste. He knew that true wisdom often came from the most unexpected places, and it was this wisdom that had shaped him into the king he had become. Elara joined him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about, my king?" Drystan turned to her, his eyes filled with love. "I'm thinking about how far we've come, and how the wisdom of a fool changed the fate of a kingdom." Elara smiled, leaning in to kiss him. "And it will continue to guide us, for it is the foundation of our legacy." Together they watched as their children laughed and played, the future of Veridale bright and full of promise. The kingdom had learned that wisdom, humility, and love were the true pillars of a just and prosperous society, a lesson that would endure for generations to come.